All right. Hey guys, thanks so much for joining us today. We are here with the Harts, Jeffrey and Heather from Hart Strength Endurance Coaching. And we have Coach Kevin on the line. Can you say hi, Coach Kevin?
Hey guys, how's it going?
And I am Coach Brian. Coach Kevin and I both coach through Hart Strength Endurance Coaching. And today we're going to talk about one of their most recent epic adventures. They are adventure racers most recently, and we are going to talk about their most recent adventure. And I'm not quite sure I know enough about it, so I'm going to leave it to them to give us maybe a few minute intro onto what the event was, how long it was, what the disciplines were, and we'll just start there and get going.
Sure. Yeah, you want me to dive in?
Go right
Okay. So adventure racing is a multidisciplinary endurance sport. So unlike triathlon, where you have, you're set, like we're gonna swim, we're gonna bike, and then we're gonna run. In adventure racing, there is no set distance and there is no set order. So common disciplines are gonna be trekking, which could be running on foot, mountain biking, and paddling, which could be kayaking, canoeing, rafting, all sorts of things like that. But you don't know when you're going to do it, and you don't know how far, and you could be doing things more than once. So you may like run, bike, run, paddle, bike, like that. Along the way, you're looking for checkpoints or control points, which you are typically given maps. And either you will have to plot those checkpoints on the map yourself, or they'll already be plotted for you by the race director. And there's no set course. So unlike a triathlon or an ultra or anything like that, there is no route you have to take. You kind of have to figure it out yourself using a map and compass. No GPS, no phone, no technology. So that's the long and short of an adventure race. And we just did C2C adventure race, which they are calling an expedition race. I know it gets a little questionable as to what constitutes an expedition race, but it was 72 hours long. We started on the west coast of Florida, and we made our way all the way to the east coast of Florida, looking for, it was like 72 checkpoints along the way. We were on foot, we were on our mountain bikes, and we were in canoes on and off, switching through those the whole time. And that's what we did.
For 300 miles.
Yes.
Yeah.
How many, Jeff?
300 and change. I think it was like 325 total, something like that. I forget the actual numbers. I think it was 150 to 160 bike, 50 to 60 in the boat, and
like
then
70,
60
on
to
foot.
80 on
Yeah.
foot, something like that.
And is there like a time cutoff for this? You said there's no set distance, so it's just based on time.
Yeah. So this one, the cutoff was actually 74 hours. Even though they call it a 72-hour race, he gave a little buffer. And the way it works in this sport is that's your time limit. The second you are over, like literally 74 hours and 1 second, you get a point taken away from your checkpoints. Every 15 minutes after that, you get another point taken away. So it kind of boils down to strategy, like if you know you're going to be late, do you go after those extra checkpoints to kind of like even it out? For us, that was not a concern, as I'm sure we'll get into later. But yeah, so most races, that's how it goes. Sometimes there will be a hard cutoff, like get back or you're just DNF. But this one was not a hard cutoff. In fact, they had people finish. One team finished almost 6 hours after the cutoff, but they finished. They came across the finish line on their own. So
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brian.
Oh, I was just going to back up a second. I didn't know it was like a scoring as well. So I just thought it was, like start to finish, like any other endurance event. And if you're the first one across the line, you're the winner. But it's not. So there's a scoring system to it. So can you just briefly touch on that a little bit?
Absolutely. And that's kind of what makes this sport so much fun, I think, is at the end of the day, the most points wins as long as you're within the time limit. So for example, let's say, we're competing with another team in first place, and this is in our magical La La Land here that we're in, but we're competing with another team, and you know, they're just ahead of us, and there's maybe like a checkpoint that's well off the course, like a good, you know, mile off of the straight and narrow to get to the finish line. They decide to go to get to the finish line and not go for that. But we decide to go for it. So at the finish line, they may finish 30, 40 minutes before us, but we went to get that checkpoint, and now we have another checkpoint ahead of them. We've got a greater total checkpoint, so we're going to win. So that's where the strategy kind of comes in. In some races, all the checkpoints will be worth 1 point. In other races, there may be some that are like way off you have to go really far off your course to get them, and they could be worth 2 or 3 points. So it really boils down to strategy in how can we be the fastest and get the most checkpoints? And because that's what's ultimately is going to win, is the most checkpoints within the finishing time.
Awesome. So this one sounds like it was predominantly 3 events or 3 disciplines is what I'm trying to say. But in other adventure races that you guys have experienced, what other events have you done? I wouldn't say maybe 3 is probably typical, right? 3 is probably not typical.
3 is about the standard, and you can always expect these 3 in a real adventure race. But let's see, 2 years ago we had a race that had axe throwing in it. Which was kind of neat. In fact, the race that we're doing in a couple of weeks will have some obstacles in it, kind of like Tough Muddery, Spartan-y type stuff.
Traverses.
Traverses. We have a race coming up in May, where we'll be doing, I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation, but a Tyrolean traverse across water. So we have to have climbing harnesses, and we'll hook up and, you know, scramble across that. And then in October, I think it is, we have a race that actually has rock climbing in it. And it won't be like, you know, crazy solo, no rope climbing, you know, it'll be full, they'll be fully staffed with professionals watching. Cause, you know, when you're pushing hard, 15, 18, whatever hours in, you want somebody there to check your harness, you know, make sure that you're tied in. But you'll see all kinds of different things. You'll see races that involve pack mules, horses. I've seen roller skating in races.
Lego building.
Yes, Lego building as a prologue. Honestly, it ultimately ends up to the discretion of the race director of what they would like to throw at you.
Awesome. How long have you guys been doing these adventure races together?
Together only since 2019. When we met, Jeff had already had a handful of bigger races that he had done. And he tried really hard to convince me, you know, that this is something I should try. It went as far as leaving like Primal Quest DVDs around so that I would watch them. And I did. And I was like, this is cool. But at the time when we first met, I was like, you know, eyeballs deep in the obstacle course racing world, and then kind of got into ultra marathon from there. And I was always like, I don't have time. You know, I wasn't into mountain biking, which is obviously necessary for these sports. And I was just kind of like, man, maybe one day. But it was never a priority for me. But then in 2019, right here in Myrtle Beach, where we live, a race director decided to put on an adventure race, and there was a 3-hour option. And I'm like, wow, this is kind of, I feel like I'd be silly to not try it. He had bought me a mountain bike like 2 years prior, and I hated it, but I was still like, oh, I mean, what perfect opportunity. We don't have to go anywhere. I know the terrain. Let's do it. So we did. And I was instantly hooked. I was like, that was so much fun. I really want to do that. You know, 2020 hit, and that things got a little crazy then. So we've been racing together since 2019, but I would say it's the last year we've really gone in.
Yeah, knees deep.
So thanks for the 10,000 foot view. I think I want to let's maybe hone in on C2C a little bit. And it's the 3 events. You got is it a mountain bike or a knobby tired bicycle of some sort? I think I saw Jeff had a fat bike.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I was the only idiot there with a fat bike.
Okay.
Um,
Well, at least you said it and not me, but
Right. But to be fair, definitely some advantages to a fat bike in Florida.
Same.
I saw that the road and we'll get to that in a minute. But
For sure.
Yeah.
so you had the bike, you had a kayak, and then you had general foot travel of some sort, whether it's running or trekking or just power hiking in that combination, right?
Yep.
And so how did C to C play out? How did those disciplines shuffle you across the state of Florida?
Yeah, good question. So we were, where do you see this? We were given at the start a pile of 29 maps.
Oh
Here
my
they are,
gosh.
29 maps. We were told, you know, that we were given an order in the sense of like, you have to go from TA to TA, and there would be times where you would get in and out of your boat or, you know, on and off your bike, and they would shuttle our bikes across the state as needed, you know, if we were in a different spot. So there was definitely an order to go in, and I can tell you exactly what we did. We started with like a 30-mile paddle on first we started on open, like we were in the Gulf of Mexico for a while, and then kind of like went into a river and went inland.
Oh, but let me talk about that opening paddle a little
Yeah.
bit. One thing they didn't tell us is that the opening paddle also had a trek involved. The trek was towing your canoe through low tide across.
It was very low
sandbar.
tide, and we were hit bottom, so we
Yeah.
had to tow.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was about 30-ish miles. That took us about 8 hours.
Did it only take us 8 hours?
Maybe a little longer. I wrote it all down
Yeah.
somewhere. Then from there we went on to a bike ride, and that was about, I want to say that was about 30 miles. We kind of went through both urban area, and then we were on the start of like the Santos trails in Florida. And so this whole time we're kind of going east and like northeast a bit. So it wasn't a straight shot across.
Mhm.
So then from there we did end up at a TA.
That's
Transition area where they had our bins that we were given, that we could put like, you know, food to resupply, clothing. We put a tent in ours because this one with his shingles, we wanted to make sure he got plenty of rest. So at that point there was a trek that you could do and get like another 10 checkpoints, and that was an out and back from that location. We opted to sleep through that and didn't do that. Well, sleep being a relative term. He slept, I tossed and turned the whole time. From there we were back on the bike for like 70 miles.
Yeah,
It was a long day. We were on the bike all day long. When that was done, we got to another TA. Then we were on foot for about 40 miles overnight. So that was a long trek. From there, we got to another TA where we could have done what they call an O relay. And so that's going to be where they give you like a new map that you haven't been given before. And there's like bonus checkpoints, and they're all usually really close, so that you can separate from your teammates. So like if you're on a team of 2, one person can take a nap and the other person can go for those checkpoints, and then vice versa. But we opted not to do that either. We tried to sleep there as well. From there we went into like another 20-mile paddle. We were on foot for a very short amount of time, short being relative. It was like 4 miles, but it took a while.
Felt like forever.
Yeah. Then we were on the bike again. Again, overnight, we went to a spot where there was another orienteering section relay, that again, we opted not to do. And then it was another like 55-mile bike ride to the finish. So that was kind of what happened there. If I remember it correctly.
Awesome. Let's go back a second and talk about sleep, because you mentioned it, and you mentioned a parent struggle. So for those that don't know, I think Kevin and I are versed, and you guys are well versed, that Jeff came down with shingles the week prior, I want to say.
Yep.
If even a full week.
Yeah. It was probably, I would guess I started showing symptoms maybe 3 weeks out and didn't even know that it was shingles.
Mhm.
And then about a week out, I had the rash on my back and just things were starting to go to shit.
Yeah.
How do you feel throughout the race?
Well, so this is the interesting thing is physically I felt pretty good during the race. My shingles never acted up, like I never had any itching going on, which is crazy because I mean I'm wearing like a 25-pound ruck across my back the entire time, and you know I'm soaking wet. The only thing that I did feel from the shingles was just fatigue. The weeks leading up to the race, massive insomnia. You know, I was lucky to get 2 hours of sleep a night, which definitely played a part in our sleep strategy for the race. But fortunately, I went into the race with no pain. Like shingles does often involve like massive nerve pain. And the weeks prior, it felt like, you know, there was a screwdriver going into my chest and out my back. But for the race itself, I was in no pain, just general fatigue.
Well, I don't think anyone can question your toughness. That's
Oh.
unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably a stupid idea. My doctor kind of gave me the side eye. But I told him I was doing that.
But he didn't say no.
Didn't say no.
Classic.
So
classic.
that's the perfect way to interpret it, right? Just like what you want to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, he knew I was going to do it anyways.
Sure.
Yeah.
So just the preemptive of that is that you brought a tent, or you added a tent to your gear, so that you could get a little more rest, knowing that you were going to be a little more fatigued, and you're trying to work through the shingles and so on and so forth. Probably taking a med still of some sort, some antibiotic or something along those lines. And so, how did the sleep work for you? Well, first, let's answer the simple question: how long did the event take for you, from start to finish?
The start to finish, we were just over 72 hours. I think the race, so we got on the bus at 6 a.m. Thursday. They drove us to the other coast because we started in St. Augustine. They drove us all the way to the West Coast. And I believe the race itself technically started right before 10 a.m. and we finished just after 10 on Sunday. So yeah, it was like 72 hours and change.
Sure. So exactly 3 days, essentially. I mean, if you're doing the math, just to kind of help people out with 72 hours. And so, how did the sleep work for you? How did it, or did it not? How did it not work for you as well?
Well, this one has an incredible talent where he can be like, I'm going to bed. And then he's out, like no matter, oh, look at that, like that. He's out no matter what.
It's my only superpower.
And I can tell he gets it from his mother, who is also like super talented at that. She'll be like, good night, and then just done. I, on the other hand, struggle to sleep, you know, in general, and never mind when I'm not in my bed or if it's not the right time of day or anything like that. So, you know, the first day when we got to the first TA, it was probably like 10 o'clock at night, and we decided to set up the tent and didn't even put an alarm. We were like, we're just going to sleep. He instantly fell asleep, and I know due to the snoring that he was out, and I couldn't sleep. I had a really hard time. I think I finally ended up getting maybe like an hour or two of sleep. But we woke up around like 5:30. So he got a solid like 6-7 hours of sleep that night.
I know. It's so crazy.
Yeah, gotta love that. So, you know, and then throughout that, we took, I think 4 more naps, and each time he was like right out. Mine progressively got worse. I did sleep for like an hour on the second nap, and then that was it. I slept during night number 2. So that was Friday night. And then I didn't sleep again until the end. I did like lay there and close my eyes, but which I do think helps. You know, when you can mentally check out and just not worry about what you're doing, that certainly helps, but it wasn't sleep. So I got a total of maybe like 3 to 4 hours of sleep the whole time. He probably logged like
at least 8,
if not more, if not like 10 to 12.
Yeah.
So,
which to be fair is way too much.
For a race like this is way too much sleep.
Yeah.
But considering
my condition, I'm happy with it. But you know, we'll definitely look into alternatives for next year.
Because I know I can get away with 3 to 4 hours and
Yeah.
it's fine.
Yeah.
So did I just hear we're already talking about next year?
Yeah. So the long and short of it is our other coach, Brian Killery, he initially signed up for this race with us. We had all decided we wanted to do it together. And this was probably last spring that we signed up
Yeah.
for it. And long story short, back in late summer, I believe it was, Brian decided to pursue a career change, and he went to firefighter school. And he ended up having his graduation ceremony the weekend of the race. So he had to pull out of the race, and the race director was kind enough to defer his entry to next year. And he's really looking forward to it. So we're like, okay, we'll do it again. So we are going to go back.
So you guys, we got a lot of questions on your training for this. Like, what different aspects of your training worked? What skills did you have to develop? What was really useful in your pre-training and preparation for an event like this?
I think, well, I'll speak from me, and then you can speak for you. I know that for me, you know, being an ultra runner, coming into this from ultra running, I knew I was comfortable with overnights. I knew I was comfortable on foot. So that was fine. So what I really needed to focus on was time on the saddle. I don't have a biking background, and up until like a year ago, almost exactly, when he surprised me with a new bike that I actually love. I didn't even enjoy mountain biking until recently. So we had to do a lot of long sessions on the bike just to get comfortable, you know, to get me comfortable with it. We did multiple like 30, 40, 50-mile bike rides. Fortunately, where we live is very similar terrain, so that was very helpful. We spent a lot of time in the boat, not nearly to the extent of what we would spend at the race, but I think, you know, just being really comfortable paddling and being in that position, and just, you know, having your arms constantly moving for 8 hours, that was very helpful. We're both huge fans of strength training, and I have no doubt that was beneficial, just because in this sport, you know, the stronger you are, the less likely you're going to fatigue, I think. And you also have so many different, like, we had to portage the boats. I always want to call it portage, but anyway, we had to carry our boats, not in the David Goggins way, but in like the actual pull it out of the river, go up a hill around a dam, and then like get back in. We had to do that a couple times, and that's not easy. You know, those boats are heavy once they have all your stuff and a bunch of river water in them. So that was very helpful. But yeah, I would say that for me, it was focusing on the disciplines I'm not already well versed in.
Yeah, I would, I actually agree with that, because so of the 3 disciplines, like, I mean, you can fake your way through a trek section. Anybody can walk. You know, your feet might hurt, but you're still going to be able to move forward. In a canoe, you got plenty of room to shift around and stuff like that as you get uncomfortable. You know, you can have the current drag you along if you're fortunate enough to go with the current. Our first one was not. But on the bike, you can't fake the bike, because if you don't have that saddle ass built up, it is just going to be hell.
I like that word, saddle ass.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have that tolerance on the bike, because if you're constantly getting off the bike to relieve that pressure in your sit bones, you're not moving forward. So yeah, for me too, I think the bike concentration was a huge help. Next year there will be more bike concentration, and it'll be more than just Z2 slogs, but I think that was probably the key training aspect of this year.
And I will add, you know, talking about what we plan to do next time, I think we both went with the like, oh, we're ultra runners, we'll be fine with the foot. And like you said, you know, anybody can walk through it. But that said, we could have done so much better. We didn't run a single step, and I don't necessarily expect us to, but I know Jeff really struggled with his feet because he hadn't spent time running. I felt great, but I still think that I could have done better. So I think next time we'll certainly incorporate more long runs, because we really didn't do any. Yeah,
because even though I did mention, you know, to touch on what Heather said, you can fake your way through a 40-mile trek, but your feet will suffer if you haven't trained it.
And we did not train it.
So I've ridden a bike. I've also trekked. I haven't really paddled at all. Not even in the gym on a rowing machine. So I have no experience there. So just for a visual, are you in a tandem kayak, or are you in individual kayaks?
We were actually in a canoe for this one.
Oh, a canoe, a double canoe. One canoe for the 2 of you.
Yep. In
Okay.
fact, they were, there were a bunch of 3-person teams and they were all in the same canoe. It was a, like a 3-seat, big old town canoe, like you'd see on any campground lake anywhere.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think they were 14 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for
It
2
was good
people, they
size.
were great.
Mhm.
For 3 people, they were crammed in there. Oh, I felt
Mhm.
bad watching those people try to paddle 30 miles like that.
And there were solo racers and they had kayaks. They were in kayaks.
And so you're changing gear, you're shifting disciplines, you're changing gears, you're in and out of the water, you're in and out of this canoe, and you're portaging it up to a dam, and then getting on a new waterway and continuing on. Are you getting swamp foot? Are your feet just soaked through? I mean, and then is the weather an issue as well? Is it just humid? Could be. I haven't been to Florida in a really long time.
That's a great question.
This was, according to everybody who was there and the race directors, like the hottest C2C they've ever had. This was the 24th year. It was 85 degrees the whole weekend.
It was awesome.
I spent the whole past year, like, I don't do very well in the cold. I get, borderline hypothermia very easily. I've just never done well in it. So I spent the last year shopping for pretty much anything you could think of to keep me warm, like including these like neoprene things that go on your paddles so your hands go in them and stay warm. Like they're not even gloves. I can't remember. Pogies. I call them pierogies. So I bought all this stuff, and come to find out it was going to be 85 degrees the whole time. So it was hot. So being wet didn't matter in that sense. It actually felt good. The problem I had was that the particular gloves I was wearing, and I hadn't really practiced a ton with because it's been colder here. They left my hands really wet, and I did get macerated hands, which is not something I've ever experienced. I've always, I've had swamp foot and painful feet, but I actually had that with my hands. I've got blisters all through them still. So that kind of sucked. But other than that, it was actually kind of nice being wet in the boat.
Yeah. And what I did is, if we had a long stretch between, checkpoints or portages or whatever, I would take my shoes off and just put my feet up in the sun.
Yep.
And let them dry out as much as they could. So,
Yeah.
That way my feet weren't marinating and, in the river. I'd let them dry out as much as I could.
And I wore wool. Shout out to Smart Wool. Yeah. That they, my feet were wet, but they weren't like soaked. Yeah. They felt fine.
So speaking of this gear, this is going to get really detailed, but how when you're starting in the canoe, right? How does it then move across Florida with you? How does everything go from one side with you to the other part of Florida?
This is I think one of the reasons adventure racing gets a little pricey is they shuttle everything for us.
Okay. In this instance they did. That's not always the case with these races,
but expedition races, they normally move all your gear for you. So what we did is at the start of the race, like at check-in, we loaded our bins on one truck and our bikes on another truck, and then we of course got on a completely different vehicle. So when we started in the boat, while we were paddling, they were moving our bikes to the transition. Then once we switched onto the bikes, they take all the boats, load them back up on another truck, and leapfrog us to the next spot. And then we just kind of leapfrog from here, from A to B to C to D. And every now and then there's little out and backs in there just to kind of take up time while they're moving our equipment from there to there. But yeah, the race directors in an expedition race such as this, they'll move all the gear for you as needed.
There are, in some bigger, badass races, where you'll have pack rafts that you have to carry the whole time. They deflate, they're on your back. But that was not the case here, thankfully. Yeah. Those canoes were big.
There is solo in C2C this past weekend. There were solo racers, there's duo like yourselves, and then there's a trio. Is there a quad or a 4-person team?
Yeah. Yep. Traditionally in expedition distance races, it's 4-person, and it's always 3 men. Well, no, it has to be at least 1 female. It's typically 3 men and a female. It doesn't have to be. It could be 3 women and a male. But They have to be co-ed. In this race, it was solo. You could do 2-person female, 2-person male, 2-person co-ed, and so on, all the way up. 3-person female, 3-person male, 3-person co-ed, and then 4-person. So there was probably about there was over 100 teams.
Yeah.
There's probably like 300-ish people. It was a good bit of people.
Yeah.
That's a lot of gear moving.
Yes,
Yeah.
there were a lot of U-Hauls.
Yeah.
And any like
So-
gear breakdowns? Sorry, go ahead.
Gear
Any
breakdowns.
like
We
going
personally-
down, breakdowns, malfunctions, mishaps, things like that with the gear?
Fortunately, no.
We got
We got lucky. I mean, for example, my second ever race, which was a 12-hour, the first I've ever done. He dropped his chain on his bike. I stopped counting at 28. I was like, this is absolutely ridiculous. We had to stop so many times. His bike was just falling apart, and it's not unheard of to get flat tires, all kinds of stuff, but we got really lucky. We had zero issues. I'd say the only gear issue I had personally, and this is totally a me problem, was that I took my sunglasses off on Friday night as it was getting dark and put them in my bike, in my little bag that's on my bike. And then I put my bike on the trailer. And so the next day when we're out in the blinding sun, I didn't have my sunglasses, and we're on roads that are practically white and the sun is shining down, and I was like, I'm going to be blind and it's my own fault. But, so that was the only real.
I had a slight gear problem.
Oh, Jeffrey did have a slight.
Our last nap, we jumped into a tent. I take off my rucksack and throw it in the tent. All my gear goes in the tent. And somehow during the night, I had kicked over my ruck and it was laying on the nozzle of my bladder. So I think everybody knows what happens when you apply pressure. So I lost 2 liters of fluid inside that tent and inside my ruck as I was sleeping.
And everything he owns soaked it up.
Yeah, everything I owned kind of smelled like
Gatorade water.
Yeah, orange Gatorade water. So the next morning I had to take my safety blanket, put it between my back and my ruck so I wouldn't soak through. That was a complete nightmare.
The irony being, it's like his I call it like, yes, dad, whenever we stop or bring our rucks in a tent, he's always hounding me. Turn off your nozzle, turn off your nozzle.
Yeah.
So when I
That's karma. That's karma.
Yeah, I walked out of the tent. I was kind of like, oh.
And you have every right. But yeah, we had no bike issues at all.
No, thankfully, no canoe issues. Some people did have some canoe issues. We didn't.
Yeah, we didn't.
We
talked to another team that had like 3 or 4 flats, and they actually ended up replacing a whole rear wheel. But we got
lucky.
Yeah, we got lucky.
You guys, how I envision it is you guys are a team, obviously. And you probably each bring some strengths to each event. And so how does that work for you guys when you're out there? Does one of you steer the canoe or have the main controls? Is one of you the navigator? Is one of you, I don't know, on the bike, the lead biker and the other one follows? And how does that work for you guys?
Yeah, well, so he's the strength for sure. When we're it was kind of the running joke on the first paddle, we were going against the current the whole way, and if I had to stop to get something, we'd keep moving. If he had to stop to get something, the boat would just because I could not. He's just weighs enough that going against the current, it was hard. So he's definitely the strength. I do the majority of the navigating, but he will navigate too when I need a break. And then with riding, you've been riding your whole life. He's been riding bikes his whole life and I haven't. So especially if we're in a more urban area, I'm a little nervous. And so he'll usually take the lead and, point out what to look out for or what to do. I would say that we're pretty good we seem to, not on purpose, but our highs and lows balance each other out. When I'm in a low, he's usually not, and when he's in a low, I'm not, so we can kind of pull each other out of it. That's kind of how we work, but we do take turns with most things, just because you kind of have to, especially on this kind of distance race. You cannot rely on one person to be on the whole time, navigating mentally. It's exhausting. So but
as a whole, she's the brains, and I'm the muscle.
The brawn.
The brawn, yeah.
So you mentioned
I'll
low
leave it
points.
at
We
that.
had quite a few questions on what was your lowest point, and it sounds like you guys balanced each other out a little bit. Did you guys ever hit the bottom together, or tell us about that?
So I can tell you my lowest point was the first night.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we were in the boats again, like 8 to 10 hours in the open sun, and we sunscreened a billion times, but still, it was, considering it's February, right? We haven't had the time to kind of ease into summer weather. So I got like a little bit of sun poisoning, I think. And so that first night laying in the tent, I can't fall asleep. I just hit that, like, this is dumb. I don't want to be here. You know, I'm never going to finish this. Like, Sunday feels so far away. I was definitely feeling sorry for myself, especially because he's snoring away next to me and I can't sleep. So that was definitely my lowest point. But two things got me out of that. One was that I really stopped to think. I was like, well, if I quit, like, I'm still essentially on the West Coast. Like, how am I even going to get back to my car? I'm going to have to wait around for, you know, like, who knows when a volunteer is going to go back? Probably not until Sunday. Like, I'm going to have to follow the race, and that's going to make me feel bad. So I'm definitely not going to do that. And then the other thing was that I kept remembering what I've heard more experienced adventure racers say, and that is the first night is the worst. It's always that first night that's the hardest to get through. And for me, I found that to be true. Like, that was my lowest point. And I from that point on, I had some, like, man, I'm tired and this is hard, but I wouldn't say any true lows. How about you?
I would say my low was at the Sulphur Springs between the bike drop. And
That was
the
just
bike drop.
frustrating for me, but yeah, you were in a low.
Yeah, I was in the low for that. That was
that was the
third night.
The last night. Going into the last night, it was probably about like maybe like 10, 11 o'clock on Saturday night.
Yeah, and it was just
frustrating.
Yeah, it was frustrating because the nav was so easy, but we could not figure it out.
We hadn't gone far enough.
Yeah, we were just making stupid mistakes. Just couldn't get out of our own head. But then it was able to take like a 2-hour nap.
And you were good to go.
In a puddle of Gatorade.
But
yeah, following like a preloaded route, or like on a device, or is this something you actually have to read the map and find your way through contours, almost a little bit of orienteering maybe?
It's 100%. Yeah, you're not allowed to have, you can't even have these. At the start of the race, they give you a like tamper-proof bag that you have to put your phone in, because they want you to have your phone in case of an emergency, but that you can't use it. So it has to go into this sealed bag. Same with your watches, you're not supposed to have them. So you're not allowed to use any sort of technology at all. It's all purely maps that you follow, which is fun.
Yeah, it's really fun. Yeah, it changes it up so much.
Yeah.
But that's something you need a lot of experience with. And Heather, you're the navigator, and I know Geoff sounds like obviously he can do it as well, but I mean, that takes a lot of time, you know, to be comfortable to read those maps. That is not an easy task at all.
It's not. And I would say that this race was definitely a beginner friendly one for that, in the sense that Florida doesn't have a ton of, like, you know, we're not going over mountains or anything. So there's not a ton of topography lines on your map. And B, a lot of it covered like the Florida Trail, or you know, dirt forest roads, or you know, we were never, unless we were going specifically for a checkpoint, we were never off of the beaten path. Like, we were either on a road, on a trail, on a bike path, on a river, on something that clearly, like, you know, you're on this and it's going to take you somewhere. That's not always the case. We've certainly done shorter races where we are just bushwhacking across things. And it's definitely a thing that, you know, I am not nearly as experienced as I hope to be one day. But I think by beginning with these kinds of races, it helps build your confidence for sure.
Yeah, it definitely comes down to practice, because reading maps is a crazy skill.
And then you have to I feel like you have to have an innate, like, sense of direction, which some people just don't. And you know, like, when we first started, he was trying to teach me how to plot and read a map, and he's pointing south on the map saying north, and I'm like, that's not north. He's like, north. I'm like, that's not north. Like, as simple as just looking at a map and knowing which way is up. he was getting
And,
there.
and I'll,
So,
I'll still say go left and I'll turn right,
Mhm. So yeah,
but I can navigate when I need to.
yep.
It's really weird.
I want to jump back just for a second back to both of your lows, and they seem like they were at different times, night 1 and almost night 3 or early night 3. How did you guys together or help each other through the processes of those lows? Did you recognize it in the other person, and what was the support like? Is it just to like let them work through the process, or is it more, are you saying let's take a break and let's eat some food? What are the steps that helped each other get through those 2 low points that you just explained?
Well, this one, Heather and I kind of have a huge advantage in that we can hold hands. I'm not saying other teams can't, but
Yeah, I'm gonna start holding hands with everybody.
yeah, but I mean, when shit hits the fan and she feels like crap, I can reach out and hold her hand and say, I love you, blah, 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 be all mushy, which I think, well, I'm
Yeah.
assuming helps.
It does. And I think, like that's definitely a perk of racing with your partner. There's of course a downside to that too, in that we get really snippy with each other because we're married. And that's what you do. So there were certainly times when I would have to say, like, I would say something and I'd have to immediately follow it up with like, I'm not complaining or I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just like, making an observation so that he wouldn't get snippy. And then other times, like, and this goes both ways, but I'm just sharing my side of it. When he would get snippy for no reason, I'd call him out and be like, no, like this is like, just stop or whatever. And I know he's had to do that for me too. But I think that in adventure racing as a whole with your teammates, for me, coming from an ultra background, which is an individual sport, it's definitely been a mindset shift to offer help and accept help, because you are only as fast as your slowest teammate, and you're only, doing as well as the teammate who's suffering the most. So, when we first started, I had a really hard time if someone was like, let me take your pack. I'd be like, no, I can do it myself. I'm strong. But like, you have to let people help you, and you have to help people. So, if I'm in a bad place, but he's in a worse place, well, I need to kind of come down and meet him in the middle, and vice versa. So like, at one point my shoulders were really hurting, and I know his pack is heavy and he's got plenty of his own stuff to carry, but he was like, give me something, like dig in your pack, take out something, get something out of there and give it to me. And, the strong, independent woman / mom side of me is like, no, I've got it. But I've had to learn to be like, okay, here you go. And it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
So,
and another kind of advantage that a team of 2 has, like if she's navigating and starting to go south, even me taking the maps and taking over navigation will at least ease some of the mental stress, which may help her come out a little bit. A team dynamic between a married couple, I think, is going to be significantly different than a team dynamic of 4 not married people,
right.
But yeah, that's what works well for us, I think. And
our other benefit, we on the second day, we were walking around telling everyone our new slogan, which is cuddling is greater than winning. Like, we were taking naps and cuddling, and rather than being like, we gotta win.
Not next year though.
I don't think the race director thought that was funny. He heard it at one point.
Hey guys, so you had a bin that traveled around with you, and I recall this conversation from social media and other questions that you had, and I know you have some like some dietary restrictions that you place on yourselves, and I also recall that these TAs are not like your ultra buffet of food. If I'm not mistaken. And so you're required to bring a little more of your own food and prepare yourselves. And so how did that work for you? What did it look like? What did you eat? What worked and what didn't work? And what are you never going to eat again?
So typically that's the case with these races. This one was an exception. The TAs were like unbelievable. They had volunteers cooking. I had like the world's best egg and cheese sandwiches. We had burritos, we had veggie burgers. they had food for
Yeah, they
us when
took
we
care
got
of
there.
us, yeah.
But, we're going 12 hours between seeing them. So we definitely had to bring our own food. I didn't have any stomach issues at all. I think maybe for like one tiny second that first night, my stomach was a little upset. Other than that, I was kind of going through SIS gels just because they go down easy. Chips, fig Newtons. I had dried fruit, nuts, all sorts of granola bars. Like I had a lot of just random snacks. And nothing, so there was nothing that bothered me and nothing that I'll be like, oh, I never want to see that again. I will say that with this race beforehand, people always said like, you don't need to bring a ton of food. And we were like, how there's it's 300 miles. What do you mean not bring a ton of food? I don't think I went through half of my food.
Yeah,
I really don't think I did.
went through, I brought, I'm not lying, 25,000 calories.
We counted.
is what I had planned on needing. So I mean, that's a ton of food. That's, I mean, literally almost a ton of food. But yeah, I probably went through half to 3/4 of it. And that's, I think because they fed us so well at the transition areas. And also we skipped a bunch of legs that I had planned on. And then I think too, I was planning on 300 calories an hour, but some of our efforts were so low that I think 300 calories an hour was probably more than I really needed.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm chowing down on 2,000 calories at a transition area. That seemed to hold my hunger off. So for this race in particular, our nutrition strategy can be much more liberal than some other adventure races where they tell you straight up they're not going to feed you. The 50-hour that we have in May, the guy has said straight up, he's like, I'm not feeding you. So, you're on your own for 2 days.
So I wanted to go into, so you had great weather. It didn't seem like it rained or anything, right? It was dry conditions, 85 degrees. Florida in February probably sounds pretty nice for most people in the country these days in February. What about clothing though? Like the clothing changes, the shoe changes. I mean, bike shoes, you got probably some sort of boat shoe, some sort of trekking shoe. Maybe it's the same shoe. It sounds like you're getting swamp foot. They're getting wet. Night clothes, day clothes, the extra gear that you might need. What did all the clothing look like and clothing changes look like?
I think I used less clothing in this race than any other ultra I've ever done. I started in like a tank top and triathlon shorts and my shoes and socks. And at night I put on a long sleeve. The second day for the long bike, I did change it into like bibs to thicker, padded shorts. And that night I put on tights and that was it. And then I went back to triathlon shorts. Like that's all, so I went through like one top and 3 bottoms based on what we were doing. And I think I changed my socks 3 times. That's it. It was just, I think because we weren't, running, running tends to really kind of do a bigger number on your feet. We were walking and we were cycling and paddling. So I don't think my feet really took a beating as much as they normally do. We definitely stopped a few times throughout the various days to like put run goo on our feet some more because it was, things were rubbing.
Other places.
Yeah, or in other places, yeah. But in general, I think the weather played out really nicely in that all I needed was, I had a LL Bean like wool tech kind of shirt, long sleeve, and that was plenty for me. That kept me warm and dry. Yeah, because it did get down into the 60s, but nothing crazy.
Yeah, night felt chilly.
But that's because we spent all day in the sun.
Yeah, you're all day in the sun. But like the mandatory gear originally had, we were supposed to carry like a fleece, full rain pants and bottom,
a hat,
a beanie. But he cut all that out.
Yeah.
Last minute because the weather changed and
we didn't need it.
Yeah, we didn't need it. But yeah, I think I personally went through just 6 items of clothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a big surprise. I thought for sure I was gonna go through a lot more.
Yeah, if with a more comfortable saddle, I might have been able to spend the entire weekend in triathlon shorts. But that 70-mile bike leg, I knew I was going to want, big chamois.
Beefy chamois.
Yeah, beefy chamois. So I changed out of tri shorts in a bibs.
Mhm.
A chamois state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so it's awesome that the weather cooperates. It's really frustrating when it's you got to if you had to use all that other mandatory gear, or rain can really throw a wrench in any race that you do, really.
Wicked.
So, but what about your highlights? So we talked a little about your lowlights. What were some of your high points?
I was like National Geographic nerding out of the animals. We like, oh my goodness, right from the get-go, we saw dolphins. There were bald eagles sitting there at the start line, like on this little island, just sitting there. The seabirds. I'm a super bird nerd. So I was like, look, I'm naming all these birds that I haven't seen before. I'm seeing them in person. He got to see the manatee. I'm really freaking jealous. The one minute I put my head down to go through my bag, I hear this like commotion and he goes, manatee. And these guys in a boat near us were like, what was that? I'm like, where, what? And I missed it. But we saw, alligators,
Dolphins.
I already said dolphins, all sorts of turtles. We saw a black bear, owls. We had, big owls. This one little owl at one point, when we were on the trail walking, flew like right in front of us and landed on a tree right in front of us. He was so cute, tiny little owl. So that was one of my highlights, was definitely the wildlife. I'm sure I have another one.
And it's good you didn't run into any alligators out there. I would expect that you would like come right across them on the trail at some point.
Yeah, I think it was still too early in the year because we have alligators here in South Carolina, and I know this time of year, even on a warm day, if it's only been like 1 or 2 warm days, they're still not going to kind of be too active, because it's my understanding, like if they eat and then it gets cold again, that can actually kill them. So they tend to be slow for a while when it first warms up. So I think we got lucky there.
My high point ironically involves something awesome that Heather did. It was the third night after the bike drop. We were coming through what should have been a pretty straightforward nav section, but it was so bloody foggy. Like literally 10-15 feet.
Couldn't see.
You could be running full lamps and you couldn't see anything. We spent a good half hour just riding in circles, watching other teams riding in circles.
Everybody was lost.
Riding in circles, all lost. We eventually all kind of conglomerated, and the navigators are all working together. And Heather and I were like, okay, let's just go back to this point where we know where we are, which is always a good idea. When you're lost, go back to a point where you know exactly where you are. So we went back to that point, and I don't know how many teams followed us, but there was like 8 people just following us. Heather's looking at a map. She's like, here. Sure than shit, we get on that trail. We start going. She's reading a map. She's like, there should be blah, blah, blah here. Bam, it's right there. She's looking at a map. There should be something here. Bam, it's right over there. So it was just really kind of cool to see a tricky nav section, have Heather nail it, and then have a bunch of other teams just kind of latch on to us. It's an interesting thing with adventure racing, that you want to trust your own navigator as much as possible. But when
Sometimes
shit hits the fan, sometimes, you got to take risks sometimes. And it was just really neat being part of that.
Oh, and that reminded me of my other highlight. After that, so that's the same night, we're going into the morning of the finish.
Yeah.
And we finally come out of that those woods, and then this long sandy stretch, again in the dark, and we're finally on a bike path, and we're maybe on the bike path for 20-30 minutes, and we come around the corner and there's a friggin' Kangaroo gas station, Circle K. It was like glowing gold. I'm like, oh. And there's people everywhere. And I went inside, and racers everywhere, all just lined up on the sidewalk. It's like 4:00 in the morning. And I went in and I got the biggest frosted cinnamon bun, like gooey, gross. Oh, it was gold. It was like the greatest thing I've ever eaten in my entire life. And I'm sitting on a sidewalk that smells like straight piss, like, next to a dumpster, and I don't even care. I'm like, this is the best moment of my life.
Oh yeah,
So you can't have a phone, you can't have your watch, but you can bring your debit card.
Yep, I brought cash for that reason. Yeah.
Oh, cash, even better.
Yeah, yeah.
I think we've kind of exhausted most of our questions. Oh, I do have another one though. You talked about race strategy early on, and there was these checkpoints. You could go out and get some extra points, and they might add up for you at the end. They might not if you make the finish line in time, and so on and so forth. So we know that your strategy was, or it sounded like at the beginning was like, just keep pushing forward and maybe not the extras because of the most recent findings of the shingles and just kind of getting a lot of rest in those times when people were doing those extra checkpoints. I kind of know what happened, but will you explain to us how it played out at the end, how you finished, and how all that worked?
Yeah, so we our strategy normally in a normal race, we try to spend no more than 15 minutes looking for a CP. Like if we get to the spot where we know it should be, sometimes they're obvious, sometimes you ride right to the spot in the trail and you can see it. Other times race directors will hide them like well into the woods or wherever. So in a normal race, our rule is usually 15 minutes. And if we can't find it, we move on. Unless we no, there's exceptions. But anyway, for this one, we looked at the map, and if it was well off of our path of travel, like well off, we just skipped it. If it was kind of maybe we could find it, I think we generally spent no more than 5 minutes, which really confused a lot of other teams because we would be in an area, where we would either get to that area at the same time as other teams, or the teams would already be there. And we'd go in and spend about 5 minutes and nobody had found it. And so we'd go back to the trail or our boats or our bikes, and the other teams would be looking at us like, did you find it? And you're just not telling us, like, why are you leaving? And we're like, we got our own plans, So long story short, because of everything we skipped purposefully, like all the O relays, all the checkpoints we didn't bother going for, we ended up only getting 23 out of 72 checkpoints, which is like nothing. It's nothing. So we're at the finish line, and we're laying there in the grass just zoning out, and the race director had started the awards ceremony, and he started with I think the team who won overall, like the whole thing. Then he gave out like a special award. There was a 12-year-old. There was a 12-year-old who raced with his dad, so he got like a special award. And then he's like, okay, we're moving on to co-ed teams of 2. And then he started laughing that this one team only got 23 checkpoints. And we're not really listening. And then he said our number and our name. We were like, whoa, we took 3rd place in our category,
surprised the hell out.
Totally surprised us, because there was at least like 7 or 8 teams in our category. So that was shocking to us that we did that.
The teams that beat us though,
well, one only got 3 points more than us.
but that other
The other team got all
course.
72.
Yeah,
so we weren't even.
Jesus.
In fact, I was writing about this right now. I'm working on my blog post recap, and there was one point on the left, the overnight trek, where we were trying to take a nap on the side of the trail, and I hear and teams are passing us on the trail, and it's quiet for a while, and I hear what sounds like horses coming or something, and I look up. And it's that team running, like happy as can be, just running. Yeah. And the female on the team says as she goes by, she's like, I thought I was going to have to miss my Saturday morning long run, but I'm not. And I was like,
hey, shoot.
I know, like secretly, I mean, I don't hate her at all. I'm impressed, and I would love to be that strong. But at the time I was like, show off.
So you guys have this, it sounds like you've got this pretty dialed in, but I'm sure you learned something to take forward to the next race. Like, what lesson did you learn, and what are you going to do better on the next one?
Ooh, let's see. For our next expedition race, this sleep will definitely play a huge part, because if Heather, let's say I don't have shingles, okay, and it's going well, then it only makes sense for me to sleep if she's sleeping, because why should I be strong and have her laying there suffering when we could be moving forward? Mm-hmm. So when in doubt, move forward until she's ready to sleep. Mm-hmm. For shorter races, let's see, what did I learn from this one?
I can share mine while you
Okay,
think.
yeah.
So, one, I need to be more like thorough with making sure I have what I need before the next section.
yeah.
Like, for example, leaving my sunglasses on my bike, that was a big bad one. And part of that's just my brain. I struggle with organization to begin with. But the other thing is I carried way too much stuff.
Oh my God.
I think we both did. That's just something that comes with practice.
Yeah.
And experience.
Well,
you know?
the last trek I was carrying at least 6 liters of water.
I had like chargers and a GoPro and like all this, my
Yeah.
music and just
We carried way
stuff
too much.
everywhere.
Yeah.
We had like full-size sunscreens. Like we just had too much stuff. So that would be, I'm gonna work on paring that down. And I think that
I saw a picture of Jeff's leg. You sure you guys use sunscreen?
I know. Everyone keeps making fun of him about that.
Yeah.
We think it was the meds he's on for
Okay.
yeah.
We're gonna blame it on that because
Yeah.
I did something. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's crazy. I'm feeling like a SOB right
We
now.
both are, yeah.
Hey, we want to wrap it up and get everyone out of here on time, but we did have just a handful of really short rapid fire questions.
Sure.
Just one word answers, or a few words, just super quick. Somebody wanted to know, Christy wanted to know what the overall cost was for the event, this long course of expedition race.
Two-part answer to that. It was around, early sign up was around like $900 a person, which is very expensive. In retrospect, it was worth it. With everything they gave us and provided to us, it was definitely worth it. We did have to spend a lot of money on gear, but that was an investment. We knew going into our first expedition race that this was not going to be the last. And so it was kind of a decision we made, that knowing that it's going to get used again. So a lot.
Yeah. It's not cheap. It's not the kind of thing we're going to be doing every month.
No.
That's for sure. Maybe once a year.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you packed a lot of food out there, but you have to have that go-to for each of you. What's your go-to snack?
Oh, my new one is Pro Bar.
Oh yeah.
400 calories in that
Those
brick.
were good.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to
Those
work
were
on
good.
sponsorship with them or something. Yeah, that was awesome.
To give a different answer, I'll say I've had really good luck with SIS gels. I normally am not a gel person, and those just go down really easy for me.
It's
What
the off
flavor?
season. Oh, what flavor?
All right,
I
what
guess.
flavor did you like on those?
Orange.
Nice.
Orange.
Really?
Orange
Okay.
is a good one.
Yeah, and me for the Pro Bars, it was all of them. I think I was rotating between 4 different.
The berry
4 different
one was
kinds.
really good.
Yeah, they were all.
Yeah,
good.
they were so good.
All right, the next question is, you guys, it's the off season. We're taking watches off. We're unstructured training. You wake up in the morning, what's your go-to exercise? What's your go-to sport? What are you going to go work out?
Oh, like if it was completely off season, I'd be in the gym. I friggin' love strength training. Love it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think me too, because I'm starting to atrophy. But the weird thing with this sport is there isn't really, you make your own off season.
You can race year round.
Yeah, you can like we are racing year round, and obviously we're gonna ebb and flow with it a little bit. But yeah, unlike cyclocross or whatever, there's no strict season, so you kind of get to make it up as you go.
All right, who's got the worst war wound from this race?
I guess you.
I'm gonna say me just because of my sunburn.
Yeah, I have this weird, I know you can't see it, but I have like a super deep blister right here that it like makes my whole hand hurt. It's very strange. Not something I've ever experienced before.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I did not feel nearly as beat up as I would after after like an ultra.
So we heard that you guys have some events coming up. They sound shorter in duration than the one we just currently talked about. But what's the next big one? What's the next bucket list adventure race event that you're hoping and dreaming of?
The 50.
Yeah, so actually on the schedule is we've got a 50-hour in Virginia with Rev 3. It's just called 50-hour challenge. It's in the Shenandoah Valley, like those mountains. So we're super stoked about that. We're actually racing with Morgan and Zach, who are two HSEC clients and friends. So we're stoked about that. if I had to say bucket list, I'm super FOMO envious of the Expedition Ozark, which is happening this year for the first time. It's a 5-day in like the Ozarks of Arkansas. Am I getting that right, or is it Alabama?
That's
One of those down there.
Ozarks, Arkansas. Everybody's watched the show, right? Ozark.
We don't do TV. We're
Yeah.
weirdos. But yeah, that's my bucket list. What's yours?
Oh God, either God Zone.
Yeah, the big time.
Yeah, big time.
Like out in New Zealand.
Well, I really want to do an iTerra, just something about racing over in that Scotland area.
Looks cold.
Yeah. And of course, Nortune.
Portugal.
Yeah.
Awesome. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, lots of bucket items.
All right. Well, that's all I got. I learned a ton. Thank you so much, Brian.
Oh, of course, man. We can talk about this crap all day.
I know, we love it. We still love running too. Don't worry, everyone.
I mean, it's a part of it.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you guys, everyone, for jumping on. We wanted to thank everyone. We had questions from Christy, Lisa, Kimberly, Holly, Sally, Kate, and Morgan, all on the Facebook page that helped us kind of design the questions for this interview. I want to thank the Harts for your time to inform us of your super feat that you guys just did. 72 hours moving, even at a slow rate, is still a long time to be moving forward. So
Yeah.
Well, and thank you guys
thank you.
for taking the time to talk to us. Like he said, we could talk about this all day. We're in that like honeymoon phase post race.
For sure, yeah. And and anybody that has more questions, they can email us.
Reach out.
Absolutely.
We're happy to talk about it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, very cool. All right, well, thank you guys.
thank you. Thanks, guys. We'll
Oh my
talk
God.
soon.